Have you ever noticed how you say you want to be happy, but somehow you keep choosing the same pain, the same problems, the same emotional traps over and over again? Have you ever asked yourself why? Even when life gives you a way out, you hesitate, procrastinate, or sabotage everything at the last second. What if I told you that part of you doesn't want peace? What if I told you that your suffering isn't just an accident, bad luck, or the fault of other people? What if your pain has become familiar, predictable, comfortable? And what if that comfort is exactly what's keeping you stuck? Most people think they suffer because life is hard, but that's not the whole truth. Life is hard, yes, but not everyone stays trapped in the same suffering for years. Not everyone repeats the same emotional patterns. Not everyone keeps reopening the same wounds. So why do you keep replaying old memories in your head? Why do you keep chasing people who don't choose you? Why do you keep identifying yourself by your trauma, your past, your pain? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Suffering gives you something. It gives you an identity. It gives you a story. It gives you a sense of meaning. And once suffering becomes part of who you are, letting go of it feels like losing yourself. Think about it. If you weren't the broken one, if you weren't the unlucky one, if you weren't the one who's always been hurt, then who would you be? That question scares more people than pain ever could. Because pain is known territory. Pain is familiar. Pain doesn't require courage. Healing does. And the brain hates the unknown. Your mind is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you safe. And safe often means familiar, not healthy. So when you stay in suffering, your brain rewards you. It releases chemicals that reinforce the pattern. Stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. You feel alive when you're anxious. You feel important when you're overwhelmed. You feel special when you're misunderstood. Pain becomes stimulation. Silence becomes terrifying. Peace feels empty. That's why some people feel uncomfortable when things finally go right. They don't know who to be without chaos. They don't know how to live without drama. They don't know how to exist without a problem to solve. So they create one. Subconsciously, automatically, perfectly. Have you ever noticed how you relive arguments in your head? How you imagine conversations that never happened? How you replay moments where you were wronged? That's not random. That's your brain getting a hit. A hit of emotion. A hit of identity. A hit of control. Because in your mind, at least, you get to be right. You get to be the victim. You get to be justified. And that feels powerful. Victimhood is seductive. It removes responsibility. It gives moral superiority. It explains failure. It protects the ego. If you're suffering because of someone else, you don't have to face your own choices. If you're broken because of the past, you don't have to risk the future. If life is unfair, you don't have to try and fail again. Pain becomes an excuse, a shield, a prison disguised as comfort. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to leave. Because suffering doesn't just hurt, it organizes your life. It shapes your decisions. It defines your relationships. It influences the content you consume, the music you listen to, the thoughts you repeat, the people you attract. You don't just experience suffering. You build a lifestyle around it. And here's the part almost no one tells you. The ego loves suffering because suffering gives the ego a role. The wounded one, the misunderstood one, the deep one, the one who feels more than everyone else, the one who sees the darkness of the world. And if you let go of suffering, the ego loses relevance. It becomes quiet, invisible, and silence feels like death to the ego. That's why growth feels threatening. That's why healing feels boring at first. That's why peace feels empty before it feels fulfilling. Because chaos was loud. And quiet feels wrong when you've lived in noise. This is why some people self-sabotage right before success. Why they ruin healthy relationships. Why they return to toxic environments. Why they miss opportunities and call it fate. Because success requires a new identity, and new identities feel unsafe. Let me ask you something. Who are you without your pain? Without your trauma stories? Without your excuses? Without the emotional weight you carry everywhere? That version of you is unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels dangerous. So the mind pulls you back to old habits, back to old thoughts, back to old emotions, even if they hurt, especially if they hurt. Because pain confirms what you already believe about yourself. I'm not enough. I'm unlucky. Nothing ever works out. Pain proves those beliefs, right? And being right feels better than being free. Freedom requires responsibility. It requires action. It requires risk. And if you fail again, you won't be able to blame the past anymore. That's terrifying. So instead, you stay loyal to your suffering. You defend it. You justify it. You romanticize it. You call it depth. You call it realism. You call it intelligence. But underneath all of that is fear. Fear of stepping into a life where you can't hide behind pain. Fear of discovering that healing doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary. And ordinary means accountable. Here's something most people don't realize. Your nervous system can become addicted to stress. If you grew up in chaos, if love was unpredictable, if safety was never guaranteed, your body learned that tension equals normal. So when life becomes calm, your system panics. It looks for danger. It creates problems. It overthinks it, anticipates rejection, not because something is wrong, but because calm feels unfamiliar. This is why some people mistake anxiety for intuition. They think constant worry means they're smart. They think hypervigilance means they're aware, but it's just conditioning. A pattern learned long ago. And patterns can be unlearned, but only if you're willing to feel uncomfortable in a new way. Healing doesn't feel good at first. It feels empty, boring, unstable, because your old emotional highs are gone. No more drama spikes. No more emotional roller coasters. Just space. And space forces you to meet yourself without noise, without distraction, without pain as entertainment. That's when most people quit. They go back to what hurts because at least it feels like something. At least it feels like home. But home doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes it just means familiar suffering. And here's the real shift. You don't stop suffering by fighting pain. You stop suffering by questioning the role pain plays in your identity. You ask yourself hard questions. Who am I trying to be by staying broken? What do I gain by not moving on? Who would I disappoint if I healed? What excuses would I lose? What responsibilities would I have to accept? Those questions expose the hidden rewards of suffering. And once you see the rewards, you can't unsee them. You realize pain isn't just something that happened to you. It's something you're unconsciously choosing to keep. Not because you're weak, but because at some point it kept you safe. It protected you. It made you sense. but that version of you doesn't need it anymore. And yet, letting go feels like betrayal. Betrayal of your past self. Betrayal of your story. Betrayal of the meaning you built around pain. But healing isn't betrayal. It's graduation. It's saying, this taught me enough. It's saying, I don't need to bleed to feel real. It's saying, I can exist without proving how much I've suffered. The moment you stop feeding your pain with attention, it weakens. The moment you stop identifying with it, it loses power. The moment you choose action over rumination, momentum replaces stagnation. But make no mistake, your mind will resist. It will pull you back. It will whisper familiar lies. Don't change yet. You're not ready. Maybe later. Something bad will happen. That's not intuition. That's addiction. Addiction to emotional familiarity. Addiction to identity. Addiction to the known. Freedom feels uncomfortable because it has no script. Suffering does. You know your lines. You know your role. You know how the story goes. Healing requires improvisation, and that scares people more than pain ever could. So, here's the real question. Are you willing to be uncomfortable without suffering? Are you willing to be bored without chaos? Are you willing to be unknown without pain? Because on the other side of that discomfort is a life where your energy is no longer consumed by wounds, where your attention is no longer hijacked by the past, where your identity isn't built on what broke you, but on what you're building. You don't need to destroy your past. You just need to stop living inside it. And the moment you stop using suffering as proof of depth, strength, or meaning, you realize something shocking. You were never addicted to pain. You were addicted to what pain allowed you to avoid. And once you face that, suffering loses its grip. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you no longer need pain to feel real. And that's when everything changes.